Thank you, John. Thanks for putting this together. I'm Tony. It's almost like I'm being interviewed at the track, you know, Speed Vision or whoever Speed comes over and they talk. You're used to this stuff. The drivers, they're just, I don't know, your life is so luxurious and you just like get in the car and drive and then you're out and go to bed.
Spacer. They call us the spacer. Yeah, the spacer. Basically the space, the filler between the back of the seat and the steering wheel. They call us the spacer. Where's the spacer? Car's got to go out. Oh, the spacer's in the toilet. Let's go get him. It's really sad, actually. We get no respect. Rodney Dangerfield is basically what we should all be called, you know?
I forgot we did do that. I'm sorry. Where is the spacer? Okay.
He may have forgot. I didn't forget. Years of therapy. Years. You owe me, dude.
But you know, Jochen wasn't just the driver, he was the owner, so we had to respect him.
And a driver. Yeah. Jochen was a driver and an owner, and a very good driver, may I add. So yeah, you had to be careful around Jochen, that's true.
Let me explain about this situation with the driver, and the owner actually. And I know you don't like it when I do this, Jochen, but I have to. You see sponsorship on these cars. This is not NASCAR. I love this. This is better, huh? Fewer people, we get to know people, get to know you guys. Because I'm a mechanic, I'm not a suit, as I say, sorry, whoever. But you don't see names on a lot of our cars. That car back there, you see Mobil 1. First of all, never trust a decal on a race car. Second of all, because I will put in the car what I want and you won't see it. Second of all, and a race suit, by the way, it's money. Sure, I'll take your product. I'll sell your product. But this is true, and you're gonna have to cut some of this out, Nick. But because it's not good. But the names on the car, they don't get paid near enough to do this. The purse is interesting, you know. But and yeah, when you win Daytona, but that's prototype cars mostly. You know, when a car's $1.5 million and it's GTS, or you know what I'm saying? It's not quite the same. Now, yes, we did really well with these cars, but I want you to understand that the gentlemen's drivers pay for most of this stuff.
Yeah, well, obviously, there's truth to it that in the GT series, yes, you have a lot of privateers, but you know, the privateers, they have their heart into racing. They are total car enthusiasts, total car nuts. And you know how it is with an hobby. I mean, if you have a hobby, that's you know, the main thing in your life, and that's where you spend you know, a little bit of money on it. But the good thing is with Porsches, the beauty is you can race these cars, and they are not just like race cars. You race them for, you know, a year, 2 years, and my God, I mean, they are collectibles already. You know, look at the car. You know, these days, my God, this car has probably appreciated tremendously over the years. So that's the good thing about it. And obviously, for myself as a car nut, car enthusiast, and driver, for me it was always a dream to, you know, when I first came to the US, to drive a race car, be on a racetrack like Daytona. I remember when I visited Daytona in 1991 to watch the 500. Looking back, I can't believe that I actually raced 2 years later on that particular track. Andy has been a fantastic companion over the years. We won 97 Daytona together, which was great. The year before, actually, I don't want to go too much back, but the year before, you weren't part of the team, but we did really well in the World Challenge Series with 2 Porsche GT2s, which was actually a semi-factory effort where Porsche stepped up to the plate and gave us a second GT2 for David Murray to drive. And anyway, so then we raced extensively in 96. You raced for me in 96. And then 97, I decided to step up to the GT1 because I had really my heart set on to win the championship. And that's what we did. We needed a good car for it. And so now looking back 20 years ago, it's, you know, it's a good feeling to see what has happened, and it was a great accomplishment. So thanks a lot to Tony, to the team, and obviously to my co-spacers.
911R. This is my shop. I've had it in Los Angeles, Torrance area, for about 23 years. I've been in that location 31 because I worked for a guy named Adrian Gang at Edelweiss Porsche, which now just does well-known comedians' cars. I do restorations. Somehow we're becoming known to be a restoration shop, even though I've taken all the signs down at the shop. I don't really, it's not that I don't want business, I just want to be kind of for certain people, like people that know, you know. To me, it's just, I'm not for the masses. So the Porsche 911R, we ended up becoming kind of known to do those, and the 959s, and a lot of the race cars over the years. But we do all Porsches from 356 all the way through the 991. And now I'm studying the 991 too, as I mentioned. Very interesting car. Yes, it's a little controversial, right, with the turbocharged. But you know, we followed Porsche, just like my employees follow me with the decisions I make with the company. And we'll follow them because they've always done right by us, right? 911R is interesting because there's only 24 of them. Now let me give you a little perspective on value in this world here. There's 4 prototypes and 20 production. Pay no attention to Porsche's ads, they're incorrect. So if you see the green, this is incorrect because that was when I first got the car. 4 prototype, 20 production. Lightest 911 was our goal to race with. 1,764 pounds. These cars were built to be light. Now, there's some misnomers out there, but like the 917 had this and that, yes. The 911R had fiberglass or plastic panels, if you want to call it that. One day I was working on a 959, and I opened the front hood, and you know they have a lot of composite materials on the 959. They're kind of, I consider them the bane of my existence, because they're so difficult and so complicated. And I tell you what, I got a call from Danny Sullivan recently. And he goes, Tony, I'm thinking about buying a 959, and I'm like, I don't know, Danny. It's a year and $100,000, and I heard him fall over. You know, he was just like, what? But I'm telling you, they're a lot of money because what happens is they sit, and when a car sits, it's the worst thing you can do to it. When they sit, the suspension system does not like it, and we're talking analog computers. No, we don't have much digital control in those cars. I start thinking about it. You know, when you're talking analog, you're looking at a sine wave like this, right? And when you talk digital, you're talking square wave, okay, in communication. And it's mostly analog. Even when I connect a tester, and by the way, I do this, I go off and I talk about this stuff because this is what my life. I'm not one for small talk, but I'm great with the cars, so I talk about that. But those cars are just very difficult, and I'm going to finish my story, Steve. Well, I opened the front hood, and I saw it. He told me last night, you got to finish your story, Tony. So there was a plate there that said Bauer, and it just hit me because I've been working on the 911Rs for so long. They built the 911R. So 20 years later, Porsche had them build the chassis builder to build the 959. So what's interesting is, first of all, they're German and loyal. Right? They stick with who they, I mean, yeah, if there's a mistake, they make a correction. But I just found it interesting that they used the same, can you do something for us, Randy? Can you explain, I think a lot of people, when I'm talking to them, I don't know if they understand why, they think Porsche does everything. You know what I'm saying?
They'd like you to believe it, but they're smart. They understand that some people can do certain parts of a project better. They don't typically farm out engineering. In fact, they take a lot of outside engineering projects in. But their first use with Bauer was, in fact, before the 911R, it was the 906 race car. That grew out of their frustration, right, with trying to produce their own fiberglass bodies for the beautiful 904 race car. There are a couple of ways of making a fiberglass body. One is where you basically spray the goo into a mold. That's called scattergun. And there's no real way to control the depth. Some part is half an inch thick, some part is 2 millimeters thick. It's very inconsistent. The other thing is it can be very heavy, and weight was Ferdinand Piëch's mortal enemy. So as he took over really controlling the motorsports department at Porsche, he looked around for a manufacturer who could produce consistent quality fiberglass in very thin sheets. Bauer had that experience because they had been manufacturing fiberglass airplane hulls for, well, since the end of World War II. So at the time 1964 and 5 rolled around, they were experts. Piech was the father of the 911R. It was his brainchild, and he wanted that thing as light as possible. The absolute minimum the FIA would allow for a production car was 800 kilograms, 1,764 pounds. So Piech literally scrutinized every gram of weight on that car. That's why the panels on that car were done by Bauer. So as you said, flash forward 20 years, Porsche's looking for an excellent composite materials fabricator, and they go to who they know.
Well, so the point is, they have Bosch, they outsource, they go to Fuchs for the wheels, they go to Bosch for the electronics, they go to Sigla, I'm trying to think of the glass manufacturer, you know what I'm saying? They go to different companies and they have them, and by the way, speaking from an aftermarket perspective, that's OEM, right? So what I like is when I buy brake pads, I want the Porsche triangle with the P in the middle. That's all I use because I don't like squeaking brakes. Things like that I'd like you to pay attention to. So what they're doing is they're building the car and they take the chassis, the regular Porsche 911 chassis, over to Bauer and they modify it. So what you have is you have a 911R with no heater ducts. So it's actually welded together without the ducts. Because you can't, believe me, we've tried. It's not easy to take heater ducts out of a 911 chassis. And you might be wondering why we would do that. Because some of these cars get destroyed and you need to make one and we have a VIN. Things like that are interesting. Like if we crash a race car, I can buy a body from Porsche. And what happens is it's called a body in white. And you've got to take that VIN and cut it out of the crashed car and send it to Porsche. Now, if you were in my position, one that has to be responsible, and I know you guys have, well, I don't know, have you bought a body in white before, Jochen? I don't think you've crashed one bad enough to do that.
Well,
It sounds bad, but
no, we never really bought a body in white, but one time actually we got like a body shelf on RSR, so I guess you could consider that a body in white, and then we built up an RSR from that back in '94, yeah.
okay. Oh, you were building a new race car, though.
Correct.
Okay, so this is impressive because I've worked with a lot of race teams that just totally, I've written the car off, you know that saying. So basically, I was working for Galen Beaker and Challenge Cup for a number of years, and the Cup cars, oh my God, it's like, NASCAR. The guys are just rubbing is racing or something. And we had to order a body in white a few times a year, and the car comes over. But when you order this body in white, you have to cut the VIN out of the car and send it to Porsche. Well, think about that for a minute. When you're in a person like myself that's responsible for it, I insured that little piece of metal for the price of the car. You have to. So if I have to insure that for $100,000 through UPS, you should see that, our faces when I go, yeah, how much insurance would you like? $75,000. It's a little piece of metal. Yes, it's a VIN number. So basically, I'm building value of this. I want you to understand. 4 prototype, 20 production, 7 or 8 of them total. The gentleman, yes.
Over the entire life of the GT, well, okay, this year there were, for 96, 9 customer cars, 16 cars, 15 total.
So imagine that. You have, and this is a race car, so we're not talking, it is a street car. But this we have 9 race cars. Here we have 24. The gentleman with chassis, oh, by the way, it's chassis number 1, the one on the closest to you. He wants 10 for, I love telling people that when they visit the shop and they're like, 10, and they stop because they know it's not 1,000. I've had some people go, 10,000? Okay. Let me know when he wants to sell it. It's like, I'll do that. I just want you to get an idea. I'm not saying that's worth that. I'm not saying it's worth less or more. I'm just giving you an idea of value, okay, because there's none of these out there, and there are no parts available. Everything has to be fabricated, just like with these cars. When I need a part, generally speaking, I have to make it. And 3 years later, you have a car. Now, when we do end up having to buy a body and take the heater ducts out and everything, it isn't the same, but believe me, there are a lot of race cars out there that are not the same from when they're new. The chassis, but in the end, are you going to split hairs? I mean, people go, oh, well, the metal in the 911R was thinner. Prove that to me. Yeah, they did acid dip them, and they did thin them out, and the RS is thinner, yes. But show me a windshield that's still around that's 4 millimeter. Okay, good luck finding one of those. And I'm not going to make one of those. Okay, we'll be okay with the regular windscreen. But I did search for 3 years. How long did we search, Tom, for titanium connecting rods? 2 years. And you know where it came from? The connecting rods for that engine came from off somebody's desk at Porsche. So 30 grand later, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Chassis number 1, chassis number 19, both 911Rs, okay? Restoration almost finished on number 1. Number 19 is in process in metalwork. There's a few 959s at the shop. I don't mean to speak down on them. They're just, I got to tell you, it's being the mechanic and what I've built up, in my knowledge, it's pushed me to my limit. Because we have bidirectional communication in all of these modern cars. Even that GT1, I connect a computer, it tells me what fault code I have, or at least some direction of where to go. But it's almost like when you're young and you're dating and you have no idea what she wants or what's going on. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna bury myself. So these cars come from all over. There's Connecticut, there's New York, there's North Carolina. They ship them in. And the most stressful part for me, and I'm just about to deliver one to Connecticut, is making sure the car's ready. Because being an automobile and mechanical device, anything's possible. And it can go 2,500 miles across the country and something be funky there. Well, I'll be there. I'm on my way. Yeah, stay calm. So this was an interesting story. One of the 959s, we have probably 15 of them that we work on, I don't know. But this was built by somebody. I am a purist. There's a reason for it because Porsche did things a certain way and they work well that way. Somebody put an exhaust system and turbochargers and different fuel injection on this car. And that's why we get so many of these 959s, because I keep them stock. I'm not saying anybody did anything wrong if they modify them. I'm not even going there, if you know what I mean. I keep them stock. I fix them. That's it. So I've learned I have all the factory tools. I've gathered all of the information about them. And there's 3 of us now in the country that work on these cars. They put aftermarket, the car is terrible. It was smoking so bad. And so I come up with things, and believe me, I'm no different than you or any other mechanic. I just sit there and think about it. 10 o'clock at night, I'm trying to figure out why a 993 turbo is smoking. And you know what I did? I know Porsche, and I know how they do things. So what I do is I go into the intro book, and I go to the car. I swear, this is true. I go to a 996 turbo out in the shop, and I'm looking at what they did different, how they modified that car differently than the 993. And I look at the turbo, and I see a check valve on the inlet. So what I did was I went to a 996 turbo, and I'm looking on top of the turbo, and I see a check valve of the oiling system going into the turbo. I'm like, you look, it's the same turbo, it's the same system. So what I did was I bought those check valves, and I made some lines, and I put them on a 993 turbo, and it stopped smoking. And I'm like, there we go. And I didn't patent it. I didn't worry about any of that. And I don't even know the people. They started selling the kits. I'm like, whatever, fine, sell the kit. And I don't also, you're awesome. Thank you. See how drivers, see what they're good for? You know what I loved? Andy's actually, well, go ahead. Andy's down to earth. I've had some drivers that are just out of this world. Yeah.
Creamy donuts, yeah.
Many.
Many.
It's true, because you start working in the higher ranks like this, or like that, I should say, and it's just, I mean, like, and Hurley was nice. I'm like, Hurley, get in the car. This is when we were at Watkins Glen or something. And Hurley got in the car, and I'm like, I need to fit you. And Hurley doesn't. He'll drive any position. And like you guys, I know you will, Andy. I mean, tell them about what you've had to do to drive a car sometimes.
Well, yeah, the thing is, if you're not the Formula One driver, if you don't have all the money when you come into the team, whether you're a pro driver or not, when you get an opportunity to drive something and you move up, the opportunity to move up to that next level, it's like somebody offering you a t-shirt. You don't say what size it is, you just say any size will work, thank you. And you know, the bottom line is I haven't fit in a lot of race cars, so I've actually come up with a style that, a video that Tony will play at the end there or some point, from Lama will show you that I have a weird hand position on the wheel. And somebody asked me yesterday, why do you have that hand position on the wheel? And I said, well, I developed that because it holds me in the seat. I had to hold the wheel that way because I was not fitting in the car. So it's a weird way to hold the wheel, and I developed that over years of fitting in cars. I mean, you drive with a guy who's a big driver, or he likes to sit further back, but he's the team owner. We didn't, yeah, but well, we had adjustable seats in the Porsche. That was not an issue, really. But some of the Porsches have a seat made for a big guy that's really wide, and like Alan McNish and I, we wanted the thin seat. So if you had the widest seat, which still wasn't hugely wide, but you've got 2 inches either side, you're rolling around. So basically, the only way to keep yourself stable is to actually have a different grip on the wheel, because you're actually holding yourself in the corners, which is not ideal for going fast, but that's the way it is. So, you know, yeah, any size fits, I'm in, I'm good. So that's it. You've got to adapt. If you don't adapt when you're somebody like myself and you start requiring care and a nanny, you're done.
So basically, what happened was they put turbochargers on this 959. Steve, I'm going to finish this one. And when you put a ball bearing turbocharger on a standard Porsche with a KKK turbocharger, that's a name of a turbocharger, with a bushing instead of a ball bearing, you've got to cut the oil pressure way down. Well, I kept putting restrictors on it and restrictors, and I was getting this car ready for Carmel for the Quail Classic. So I'm looking under this car, and I'm like, what is wrong with this 959? It doesn't stop smoking, and it smoked a lot. I mean, fire departments were called. Oh, I'm serious, it smoked a lot. Plumes of smoke. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, there's no oil reservoir on these turbos. Now, don't ask me why it makes such a huge difference. It must be a scavenging effect of some sort. And then at that point, Magnus drives up. He had just put an S muffler on a car, and I don't know if you've seen a stock S muffler. The pipes are like here. Yeah, seriously, there's 2 pipes, and they come out like extremely far. And he's like, how much? Can you say how much to cut these pipes off, please?
How much to cut these pipes off, please?
Because he's British. And no, Magnus is British.
I don't know.
No, that's why I did that. And so I cut the pipes off, and I used those. So I used those pipes as oil reservoirs. I drilled holes, I welded caps on them, bolted them to the bottom. I swear this is true. Bolted them to the bottom of the turbos of that car, and it was fine. I just want to show you guys how hours and hours and hours go into something, and it's a lot of the time it's something simple. Now, yes, I've been around Porsche since I was a kid. My dad had a shop when I was 5. I'm 53. And yes, I ended up being in this business because of him, and being in racing because of him, because we raced the 910, we raced RSRs. I mean, we got him out of England. I mean, the best of the best. My father was crazy like that. But that's kind of how it rolls. 356 notchback restoration. There's the 911R in the proper color, number 1. It's because of the Swiss drivers. Randy's going to talk about this car in a little while. And I mean, it's just, yeah, the windows have been replaced. You know, they're plexiglass. There's a Carrera GT. There's just a photo. I'm not really fond of photos. So there's Alvin Springer, Porsche Motorsport US. I'm fearful of him. I give no joke about that. I mean, he'll literally chew you out in a heartbeat. And so whatever he wants, he's like the god of Porsche Motorsport, right? Except for Europe. And Hurley Haywood, one of our guys, so I was talking about fitting him in a car. He's just a nice guy, like Andy. They'll get in, and you know what I like? I call them our stars. They get in and they drive whatever you give them, and they don't complain, and they're fast. And they're consistent. And so Andy, that's just, you know, and and you know what's really cool is when they're in the car an hour and a half, and you're like, I need you to do it again. And they're like, okay, you know, and they go 3 hours, you know? I mean, do you realize what it's like to be, I'm gonna do this because I can do this around you. I can't do this around a lot of drivers because their just head explodes. Do you know what it's like to have a guy that's out? I mean, do you know what it's like to be in a race car? Your heart's up. I mean, do you realize what it takes to, how good a shape you have to be in? It's like goes against my grain talking like this, but you're okay.
Yeah, you try to prepare for it. You never know what is going to happen. It's like endurance races. Sometimes one of the drivers might get sick, and at Le Mans, it's a big deal because there's only 3 drivers. We had that happen one of the years in Corvette, and the driver couldn't get back in. So I just did a double stint in the night, and my teammate gets in, and I'm fast asleep. But you've really only had 2 hours of rest, and then the 3rd driver's sick, so they come and get you. You've got to get back into another double stint. And then all through the night and into the halfway through to lunchtime the next day, 2 of you are doing double stints back to back, so you've got to be ready for that. This year at Sebring, actually, we were planning on doing 2 hours with me in the car, and it ended up being 3 hours and 9 minutes, of which 2 hours was in torrential rain, for any of you that saw that. And then the last hour, it dried out. So I was in for the 3 hours and 9 minutes, because just that's the way the cookie crumbled. And I hadn't done endurance racing in a long time, but the fitness level has to be there. But to Tony's point, a lot of guys, even if they maybe were fit enough, mentally, they would mess themselves up in the sense that their times would go away, and they'd be almost arguing, well, why isn't somebody else ready to get in? For somebody like myself, it was always, if they need me to stay in, they'll stay in. The Texas race, if I can tell one quick story here, the first time, and this wasn't a story I told yesterday, Corvette was looking for its first win. I've done a lot of work with Corvette. Obviously, I'm going to share some Porsche stories with you later, but Corvette was looking for its first big win in GT racing. The Vipers were the world champions, had been for 3 years. We were up against Carl Wendlinger. We were up against Olivier Beretta. Tommy Archer was in the car. Really top class, world-class drivers. We hadn't managed to win a race yet with the Corvette. This was 2000 in Texas. It was 115 degrees when we started the race. It was the hottest day. Texas was in a massive heat wave. It was incredible. Ron Fellows, absolutely awesome driver. Ron had done a stint for about 45 minutes, and then I got out. He got out of the car. I jumped in, and I got going for an hour, and it was blistering hot. There's no air conditioning. There were no cool suits. There was no nothing. The wheel well of the car was 175 degrees. You had to move your feet around so you just didn't get burned blisters. You had to kind of keep your feet in a particular position. So after the basically 1 hour, 10 minutes I'd done in the car, they got on the radio and said, "Can you go again?" Now, it was really a strange request because it was so hot. What I didn't know is Ron had got heat stroke, basically, when he got out of the car, and he couldn't get back in. They didn't tell me any of this, which was probably a good thing. They said, "Can you go again?" And I said, "Yeah, I think so. I'm okay." I said, "Just keep talking to me because it's really hot in here." And that was what I said, right? And they said, "It's really hot in here. Just keep talking to me because, God, it's hot." So I said, "Okay, great. You're doing great. Just keep going." So I did a whole nother stint. There was 30 minutes left. Ron had sort of recovered enough that he could get back in and do the last 30 minutes. And that was the first win we got with Corvette. We beat the Vipers, and that was it. So I got out of the car pretty nonplussed, because I was okay. I wasn't like dying. I wasn't seeing cross-eyed. I wasn't feeling cold suddenly, which is, as people tell me, that's what happens before you really get in trouble. I got out of the car, and the medics were there, and Robin Pratt, Gary Pratt's wife, who's like the mother of the whole team, was there, and they're like carrying me and like taking my shoes off, and Robin's down here taking my shoes off. "Robin, what are you doing?" She says, we got to do this. You've been in that car 2 hours. Nobody else had done a double stint. Carl Wendlinger's in hospital, and it's like everybody's dying on pit lane. I went, I'm fine, Robin. I'm fine. Get off your knees, Robin. Darry's right over there. I mean, stop it. You know, it was like, it was a true story. And I was absolutely fine. And since then, Claudio, the team manager, he said, he christened me basically Iceman or whatever. And it was like, that was it. It was a story ever since. Because this English kid, whatever, was putting up with this heat. But you've got to be ready for that. And that was the first win Corvette got. And I'm not saying I'm any more special, different than anyone else, but I do tend to be able to put in. Oh yeah, Feehan, the quote. This was on TV, and I won't say what he said, but it was live on TV. Doug Feehan, everybody knows Feehan. He's the team manager for Corvette, has been for 20 years. He was with the Intrepid prototypes before that. The guy's a genius. And he's just kept it, and he doesn't even work at GM. Nobody knows how he does it. He must have pictures on everybody at GM somewhere. But he's still there, and he's absolutely brilliant. So they put a microphone in. You guys have got your first win. That's awesome. Andy Pilgrim did a double stint. This heat's unbelievable. And he said, Pilgrim? Oh, he's an effing reptile. Don't worry about Pilgrim. He'll be fine. And that was on, but he didn't say effing, excuse me. He used the word, and it was live on TV. It was live. Remember that? Oh, classic.
I want you guys to know.
Okay, I'm done.
Thank you, Andy. David Murray, one of my drivers. I'm sorry. We don't own you guys. It's just, you know, we think we. Joel Reiser, Craig Stanton, a guy I brought into pro racing for the first time now, is an awesome driver. We actually made him pay. Isn't he good?
Great. Fit.
You talk about fit? Yeah. It kills me. Muscles in his spit. You know, it's sad when we win a race and I want to take him to dinner and he doesn't drink a beer, he doesn't want to have a steak. I'm like, relax just for once. And he doesn't. Craig Stanton. We won many races with these guys. There's our get-together. We were testing at Willow Springs. There's Mrs. GT1 and our GT3R. Daytona, second place finish. Moving on, Mid-Ohio. This is what happens when you have an accident. Now, a lot of teams may wrap it up, but most of them that I know don't. We put the car together. Because the way I look at it, and my crew's looking at me, I say, we're going to have to buy the parts and put them on the car anyway. Might as well just do it here. Very quickly. Get ready. So then basically you're working underneath it. Notice the jack stands. Please always use jack stands. Okay, because it happens an awful lot in do-it-yourselfers or shade tree or whatever you want to call it, that people aren't using jack stands. Please, it's not worth it, not using them. So did really well. Hurley, we did well at Sebring the whole season pretty much. And you know what, yesterday was kind of cool because Jeff was here. My main competitor from Alex Job Racing, which we just worked against the whole, and I told him a few times we cheated, and that was fun. Like I said, you know, Randy, I said, Jeff, I came over to him and I said, you know, I got to tell you about that time we qualified at Daytona. And by the way, Joel Reiser was in the car and he goes, yeah, I remember that. Joel never went that quick before. And I was like, yeah, because Johnny was in the car with Joel's helmet on. He was a little shocked. Did you see him? That was a good one, wasn't it? So one day at Mid-Ohio, my guys are crazy, right? They're guys. So there's Craig Stanton, and it's our garage, and the guys had this brilliant idea to go steal the women's bathroom sign and put it on our garage. They didn't miss one woman in the paddock that whole weekend.
No, I'm not going to go quite there. What I do want to say something, though, because you guys Tony's very humble. And he says, you know, he said something earlier that kind of stuck with me. He says, I don't even deserve to talk about this car. Tony's got a lot of history with me. He's going to show some pictures that bring up some of the history that we've had with Porsche, which probably we didn't even remember until this weekend. But Tony is exceptional. When he first came to the team, but we'll talk about Tony for a second, but Jochen put together a team. And these are private teams with factory support. And you don't just win. It was something Jochen said earlier when he said, you know, in 97, I wanted to win a championship. And we did win a championship in 97. We won manufacturers and we won drivers in 97. He was in 96 saying, you know what, we need to put a team together to win a championship. Those are some very simple words. But Jochen put together a team that could win the championship, including Tony, who, you know, I think I probably mentioned Tony and gave him a recommendation. But he's just a ball of energy. But the bottom line is the guy knows what he's doing, along with every other person on the team, who Tony will talk about. But I just wanted Jochen to say something because he had that idea, and you just don't say something like that and make it happen. Do you know how many guys who had a vision, were race drivers, had the money, wanted to win a championship, spent all the money to do it, and never won the championship? 99% of them. And so it's a simple expression. So I just want to talk about that, putting the team together.
Yeah, okay, great, thanks. Well, that was, starting the team. Maybe I go a little bit into the history. Back in 1992, I actually got to meet Alvin Springer. You talked about him earlier. He's not only your buddy, my buddy too. He's something. Anyway, so coming from Germany and having driven on the Autobahn and on the Hockenheimring, I just felt like the need to do something more here in the U.S. So in '92, I bought a 964 Cup car, which was they only had like a limited 45 cars I think they built back then in '92.
Well, originally 28, right? For homologation. Right.
Yeah.
And then they built more of them.
Okay. And so that was for the Carrera Cup Series in the US. It never happened. It got canceled last minute. And so Porsche called everybody up and said, hey guys, sorry, the series is canceled. You don't have to take your cars. Don't worry about it. Fine. And I'm like, no, this doesn't work here. I mean, I want to go racing. So I talked to Alvin, and I said, Alvin, hey, find me a race series, and I want to entertain, that Cup car. So he said, well, the only place you can run in is in the Supercar Championship in 1993, and correct, in the Lotus. That is actually where I first ran into Andy in that year, and so I was behind him, so he was far ahead of me. So. And so that was the humble beginnings of my racing career in '93. Then we also did Invitational GT, and my God, I never forget when we went to Daytona for the 24-hour. At that time, the Toyotas still were running, the GTP cars, and you were talking about the speed differential from we did like a 2-minute lap, and the prototypes did like a 1:30, 1:33, 34, I think even. Yeah, oh yeah, that was amazing. And but you know what? But that's also a challenge, because you're out there and you're like, wow, this is impressive, this is amazing. I wanna move on. And so Alvin, he kind of liked what we did. I hired Brad Kettler, who was pretty well known in the Porsche scene. He used to work for a Porsche dealership in Cincinnati. And so he came to work for me. That was it. I mean, it was basically just Brad and myself. He started, to call people in for the weekends, and then the team started to grow. Brian Kopens came on, his wife Pam came on, then Tony came in and helped us numerous times until we hired you full time, then John Wright. So it was, I tell you what guys, I mean, it was amazing. It was a dream come true, to literally build something from scratch. From just like a 964 Cup car, then moving on to the 964 RSRs in 1994, which was a great year, together with John Osteen. You probably remember John Osteen. He was a great mentor. I never forget, like in qualifying. That's exactly. That's exactly. Yeah. So it's a small little world, and then we did the RSRs in 1994. Had great success with them. Won several races. Had like 8 podiums that year, and then Porsche was really interested, in stepping up one notch. And I never forget when I was in Weissach in November of 1994. To look at, they have that yearly Porsche Cup thing where the top 15 actually get a money prize from Porsche. And so then I saw for the first time the GT2, and I'm like, wow, what a car. That car needs to be raced in the US. So that's when we started to switch out cars, sold the RSRs, got 2 GT2s, started racing the GT2 starting in 1995 at the 24-hour Daytona with Hurley Haywood. And Hurley is an awesome co-driver, just like Andy. I mean, Hurley and I, we are, good friends from then, and same here with Andy. Super nice guys to work with, no prima donnas at all. Hurley, obviously, he's a little smaller than I'm a tall guy, but you know, no problem there. I mean, he definitely accommodated me. You know, he's like, hey, Jochen, don't worry, that's fine. You know, just, you know, I don't need my seat cushion. Just drive. Let's drive the car the way it is. And so that was an interesting race in 1995. We came in 4th overall in the GT2, second in class, first time out for the twin turbo car. And so from then on, we kept stepping up, and has been fun ever since.
Well, you know, I got to cover that for a second. Think about this. Brian Copan's best gearbox guy did all the teams I'm talking about after this now. After we stopped racing with Rohr, Brian did that. Brad, do we even have to say it? I mean, all the Audi racing and everything. I mean, in Europe and U.S., they've won Le Mans more times than anybody now. And then myself, we had Riser Callas and on and on. So I think that you just had a hotbed there, and it was incredible.
Yeah, but it's without the guys, I mean, there's no way that you can succeed. I mean, hats off to all of you. I mean, obviously with you, I've never seen you anywhere else than under the car, you know. I mean,
well, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jochen. Can you talk about that? Well, I'm going to...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw this picture for the first time yesterday. It was quite interesting. Just an aside, the car on the left is the Evo car that I drove with Alan McNish in 1999, and actually I also drove the Celine, the one behind it, and I'd never seen the picture before. So when I told Tony I'd driven both those cars, he was like, wait, what? So I'd driven both those two race cars. The Celine was entertaining. The last time I drove that was at Laguna Seca. The last time I drove the Evo was with Alan at Portland International Raceway, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but it was just so happened I'd never seen this picture, and like, hey, I drove both those cars. So it was quite interesting. You can tell how you got there, because it's pretty cool driving through the streets.
It's really funny when a driver says that car was entertaining. Because I was cracking up right there. I'm like, I'd love to hear about that. But that's a fireball, that Celine. No offense, but I think it was on fire most of the time.
Well, it didn't get on fire when I was in it, but I wasn't the regular driver. It was one of those times, again, where they needed someone to teammate with the pro driver, and whatever happened, the other guy probably got smoke inhalation, so he couldn't do it. So they said, hey, Pilgrim will do it. He's a moron. Get him. And he's cheap, you know, and that was it. That's how I got in. But it didn't ever get on fire with me, I must say. So, it did burn up a few times. When I was in other cars, I would see, oh, the Celine's on fire again. Okay, great. Hopefully the driver got out okay. But yeah, it did happen for sure.
We had a saying, Kettler and Copans and I, because they kept blowing fuses for the fuel pumps. And every race they'd be off in the infield, like shut off, and we're like, if that damn fuse blows one more time, we're gonna have to do something. Because we just because that's what you do. You joke about the other teams, right? I mean, it's in racing, because you're up 24 hours a day. That is the Evo car, as Andy says. So we have a 96 here. I'll show you the differences. We have an Evo, the 97 Evolution car. And then we have my RSR there that Joel so kindly had purchased so we could go racing. So we had a media event. And I got to tell you guys, media events to me were a pain. I'm hard-nosed. I was very difficult to work for. I'm much nicer now. And it was, sabotage was really a concern of mine. So every night, and I didn't worry about human life with mechanics. It was, what I mean is you had to work hard, and it had to be perfect. And the car had to look perfect, and the wheels had to look perfect, and everything had to be done a certain way, because I wanted the wheels torqued, no air guns. I mean, people laugh at this. At my shop for 23 years now, we don't use air tools. Yes, if there's a gland nut, if there's something we really need to take off with an air gun, we will. But everything is done by hand. That's perfection. You feel every thread. You feel what you're doing. You pay attention to what you're doing. I got to tell you, hang on, I'm doing the media event, so I'm coming back to that. With the ADD that I have, which isn't even that bad, really. I make fun of it. It really isn't that bad. With that, I was very, very good at the race cars, because I just focused so steadily at Le Mans and Daytona and around all of the circus and everything, I didn't have a problem. But I just went media event. Okay, so what happened was I was very picky about the car, and the car should not do anything that we didn't really need to do. Is the word superfluous? I don't use that word very often. So basically, to me, it was unnecessary. So what I said, okay, if we're going to have to do a media event, which now I totally understand the money aspect of it, I'm going to be with the car, I'm going to drive the car, and I'm going to make sure, because the streets of San Francisco are not quite, let's say, copacetic for a clean underbody. So, and look at how much the problem is we even raised the car some, even though it doesn't look like it. Look at the GT1. Everybody raised their cars, and do you know what that means? That's a night worth of work for the guys. Because when you lower the car again, anytime you change height, you change corner balance, you change alignment, and they're just like, oh, really? Why? Well, because the camera's there. And this isn't NASCAR, meaning there's not a lot of TV. You know what I mean? So, and if there is TV, guess who's on it? But we took the cars, and I got to drive the car through the streets of San Francisco. Now, I want you to look at this. GT1 in front of me, Chip's 2 motorcycle cops in front of me, the bay with how beautiful is that? And then with one other hand, the third one, I pull up a 35 millimeter camera at the time, right over the dashboard. But I'll never forget that now. Okay, Craig Stanton I also ran, and when I say, look, I ran Lama, people go, really? Did you drive? I'm like, no, I'm not a driver. I've raced SCCA, I've raced PCA Club Racing, all of that, but I have a lot of respect for what they do. I'm not going to do this much more. So basically, it's called Peterson White Lightning. We ran Daytona of '01. I am not the owner or crew chief of that team. They asked us, they had a second car they wanted to run, so they called me in. Dale White ran a lot of GM off-road programs, and he called me and he goes, and then this happens a lot with other teams. They say, hey, we want you to come in and run our second car. So that's what I do. And this was a huge disaster. We finished well, but disaster on the inside. I brought my crew, and I didn't tell the story yesterday, I brought my engineer. And my engineer, Harry Haggard, did the engineering for both cars. I can't engineer while I'm running a race car. And that means you pit this lap, you do this, I want you to change these 2 tires. No, the crew chief doesn't do everything. The engineer is who decides how long the tires are going to go. Those guys are brilliant. And it's the whole group. Cheech comes over from Yokohama and he goes, car's pushing. I'm like, what? Japanese guy, comes over and he tells me what the cars, aren't they incredible?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if you want to expand.
A good race engineer, and I've worked with some great ones. Jim Bell is one of the guys, seat of the pants. Jim Bell can look at a race car. I've been racing for Corvette and Cadillac, and the funny part, Jim would just watch the cars going by, and then he'd come over, saunter over, like in the team, and I'd be standing there, whichever team, it didn't matter whether it was the Corvette or the Cadillac or a Porsche, whatever I was in at the time, and he'd saying, hey, yeah, got a little push going on there, huh? And I was like, really? You could see that? He said, yeah, it's obvious, it's obvious, you gotta push, you gotta fix that. I said, well, I did tell him, said, well, if they don't know how to do it, get them coming to me, and I'll fix it. Because Jim Bell could fix anything. He's probably the best seat of the pants engineer I've ever met, and he doesn't know how to spell computer still. He doesn't, but he's just absolutely brilliant. But the good engineers, especially the old school engineers that have been around a while, they can watch a car on the racetrack, literally, even a car that has, an inch of travel, and tell you what the suspension is doing and what the car's doing and should be probably how to fix it. And a lot of the engineers sometimes we work with on the teams, as you will know, the engineer on the team doesn't know, is rear end from an elbow, and he's got 214. You've got to work with him, and I'm not the guy coming in with the money and everything else and the sponsor, so you just go, You try and tease them in a particular direction, it doesn't work. And Tony Owell, when he's saying he's a journeyman who comes in, these teams invite Tony in with his crew to run a car, that means there's huge respect for him to do it. But then he comes in and sees the mess, as he just said, in the team, but he has to keep his mouth shut, which is not easy. Same thing for a driver coming into a team, asked to drive. You can't open your mouth until 5 years later, 20 years later, like we are now, and tell people what really happened. And it's quite interesting. But yeah, they're absolutely good engineers, incredible, incredible. I don't know how they do it. I mean, I can figure a car out from sitting in the car, which is something that actually a lot of drivers can't do, which is why I've been asked to drive a lot of teams. This is why I've been asked to set up race cars, develop new race cars, and production cars. So I have some gift there, which is great, because it's set me in racing and given me a lot of other fun stuff to do. But you were entirely correct. It's tough sometimes.
Well, so the disaster, I'm glad that happened because it allowed me to rethink where I was at. The disaster was I didn't keep my mouth shut, and I got very upset. And yeah, usually I do because we have to. Honestly, you think that the team did call me, but you know where it comes from, Alvin Springer. Alvin Springer, the control. You know, this is a chess game for them with all these teams. I think you guys understand that, right? So basically, I didn't keep my mouth shut. I'm very vocal, as you can tell. I say what I think, and I said this is bullshit, and we need to get this car running right. And turns out, we had the two top teams of his factory team, and I'm like, this isn't going to work this way. And during the race, it rained a lot in '01 at Daytona, and you need to talk about that after. Let me just, I got to finish this story. So basically, you get trench foot. You know, you get your feet are wet for hours, and yeah, I know, like not in the war, but you understand what I'm saying, right? I mean, you're just in water forever, and yeah, I can get out under the tent Seder, but I got to watch the car going around what I can see, and then I watch the times and I look at the data that we get from the tires and whatnot, and basically we had a huge mutiny happen. And right before the race started, the White Lightning team hid all the air hoses and guns, and I went up to pit lane, and I'm looking at everything, and I'm like, where the fudge is all of my, I mean, the race is going to start. And if you're not ready right at that moment for that race to start, because there can be, as you know, the first lap of the race is one of the most dangerous. And so I have to be prepared for either a puncture or something to happen. And that's why I'm so picky about our cars and putting them away at night in the transporters. And because we did that. I'm worried about sabotage. We're spending millions, and well, I'm not, but we're spending millions and millions and millions of dollars, and I want the cars clean, ready, prepared, and put away in the transporter. And honestly, if you really want to be nasty, there is never enough time. You have to pick. That was one thing I didn't like about Brad, but I liked, and I learned a lot from him, because what happened was there would be a list on the car, and then there would be, oh, we're about finished, we're going to get to go home, it's 10 o'clock. And then there would be another list that would carry us on to 1 a.m. or something. Now, a lot of these tracks close now. You know, Daytona closes, you got to leave the track, you know, and that's bad because there's things around Daytona that are not good, because race mechanics love, as we in Canada, we used to say peeler joints. I'm like, guys, you're not going out tonight. We need to handle the race car tomorrow. So, yeah, we had a big mutiny at Daytona, and during the race was a huge problem because my engineer came up and was screaming in my face, back the F off with that car, because our second place, the second team car, which I was running, and I brought him to run with me, he was actually engineering both cars now, and they wanted to play team orders with these cars, and I'm not like that. I'm going to do as well as I can, and you back off. And we had a fight, and I haven't talked to Harry since then. It's been 15 years, Harry Haggard. And I'm like, no, I don't care. I'm the second car. We're going to win if we can. And I had Hugh Plum. I had a number of really good guys in the car, and you know what? I don't care. I'm passing first place car if I can. I mean, you've dealt with team orders, right? With Corvette, I'm sure he's not even reaching for the mic. So there we are at Daytona. You can see the paddock, or the pit lane is wet, but this brings up memories for me that are interesting. Instead of when you look at it and you see these two great place to finish cars, yes, because we got through that, but it wasn't easy. Let me tell you, there was almost fist fighting going on. There's a car that I ran at Lama in '01, won Mechanic of the Year, all of that. That's special and all. But I got to tell you, again, I got left at the hotel. There's fights that go on, not just with me. It's just there are things that happen when you're an American and you come in to run a German team. Do you know what that's like? No, it doesn't work so well. But you know what? In the end, we did well, and everything worked out okay. there's a video on my YouTube page. And in the beginning, it's tense and schön, you know, like nice, bringing a camera and all that. And then at the end of the race, it's like, hey, Tony, you know, on the pit lane, you can watch it. The team Rohr, you know, first place. You know, you have to realize you have to gain respect of these guys. You know, you don't just come in and have this name. It doesn't matter. You need to gain their respect. There was us at Vegas. Pam and I, she took good care of us, Brian's wife. And yes, that's dirt. That's not suntan, like Hamilton suntan or anything. You notice some of my things that I talk about are all from older people's stuff. George Hamilton, people are like, whatever. Norbert Singer, I have an awful lot of respect for the man that designed, engineered actually the 962s and the 917s, I would assume Randy would have to answer that. But he'll talk about Norbert in a little while and everything that he's done. But for me to work around these guys, I mean, here's what happened. We did so well with Jochen's team that we ended up with a gift. You've got to talk about this, Jochen, and why they gave a factory car to run, because honestly, I'd never been able to go around the factory team very much before that. It's all secretive. And how this turned out.
Well, what happened when we won the championship in 1997 with the GT1 car here, Porsche, they were still, you know, not doing a factory effort, but they were getting ready to gear up for a full-fledged factory effort in '98. And then they said, wow, you know, we have another factory car sitting around, GT1 Evo, and we would like to give it to you and let you run it in the 1998 24-hour Daytona race. I mean, that was a huge honor for us. We took the car, and actually we were given the car earlier, already in like October of 1997, where we actually did one race, an FIA race in Laguna Seca,
Yeah.
and but that we can talk about that later on.
We'll talk about that. A whole nother thing. We don't mean to bring all the negative out. It's all just real. It's just reality of racing.
Yeah. Well, actually, in the factory actually was surprised how well we did with their factory car, actually beating the factory at their own game in Laguna.
We'll do that in a little bit.
And then in 1998 we did the Daytona 24 again, and came in first class and second overall. So
second overall in a GTS car, you know, that's incredible. Like do you realize what the prototypes are capable of? You know, when it's not unlimited, but it's similar basically compared to what we're doing. So that's Herbert Ampfer, head of motorsport world. Okay. I mean, for me, it's just like, oh my God, okay, Herbert Ampfer, I don't deserve to be around him, and Alvin Springer and Joel Reiser. Again, Alvin Springer, I've got to give homage to this gentleman. And then every time I go to talk to him, he's like, young, out of the way, move over. I don't have time for you right now. Look at him. He does that all the time, and he doesn't even look at me as he's walking by. He's just like, that's how he is. And I'm like, look, I've got a team, 2 factory-supported cars. And he's just like, later. I'm not very happy at that point. So there's Harry Haggard, my engineer. I haven't told anybody about that story since that's happened, but he has run a lot of good cars, and I actually pulled him out of retirement. He had been in retirement for about 20 years because he ran Hagestad's cars in the 70s. And I'm like, you've got to come. You're brilliant. You've got to come run my cars for me. Be an engineer. So we got second in class at Daytona that year. Claudia Hurtgen, interesting story, which I'm going to let Andy talk about. If you notice, her hands mangled right there, and this is Lama of '97, and she was not in a good place, and she
It was a prequel, remember? Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
a prequel.
she was crying, and I'm like, you've got to get in my car now, and you've got to clear your head of what Andy's going to tell you. You've got to clear your head, and I need you to run this car. We're at Lama. This is the biggest event, you know, that we can do. And Andy, you want to tell them why she was messed up?
Yeah, we were running pre-qualification at Le Mans, which was a much bigger deal back then than it is now. It's not now. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion. If you're there, you're going to get in. But you had to qualify your way in. You were, once you qualified there, it was qualifying you for positions when the race weekend came. So everybody's running hard, and people were coming in. We heard there was a big problem. And what had happened was, coming up towards the Porsche curve area, once you come out of Arnage and you're running really hard out of Arnage, one of the prototypes had a mechanical problem and suddenly shot off the racetrack at 140, 150 miles an hour. As it was turning around and flipping, it flipped completely upside down. It was one of the open top prototypes, and as it shot across the top of the Armco barrier, it decapitated the driver. Completely decapitated the driver. The car disappeared across the back. You can look. It's on. Not the wreck is not on YouTube, but the aftermath of the wreck is on. You can find this footage. It was just tragic. The car disappeared into the trees, and all the corner workers went into the trees, running after the car. Everybody. What nobody realized was that the helmet containing the head of the driver had actually, believe it or not, ended up on the white line in the middle of the racetrack. And drivers were slowing down, but they were passing it. And it was minutes and minutes later until somebody realized that what was laying in the track wasn't a piece of debris, it was actually the head of the driver, and they covered it up, obviously, after that. It was massively traumatizing to the drivers. I luckily was in pit lane. My car was out there with another driver, and our driver was just, they're shocked, but some of the drivers, Stefan Otelli in particular, was very good friends. He was a young Formula One prospect driver, 21 years old. Stefan and him had sort of grown up together, and he knew the kid really well, and Stefan was inconsolable. And obviously Tony's telling you about Claudia, who also, sadly, tragically had seen this. So it happens in racing, but you're never quite ready for it, you know? So
It was a lot to get her in the car. And she told me about it, and driving past it, and I'm like, Claudia, you just got to go. You know, were you going to quit right at this point? I don't have anything else to say. So Pedro Chavez was at Nürburgring. I ran many races in Europe. A lot of these guys are just like Andy, you know, they're brilliant. And both of these other guys were great, you know, her and Pedro. They're just down-to-earth people that are quick. And you know what they do is, you don't understand that when you get out there, you have to clear your head. It's like meditation. It's all about the track. Because if you start thinking about how bad that coffee tasted, or about anything else, I mean, look at that was an extreme we just talked about. But even if you just, anything, how my gloves are fitting right now, I mean, I don't know how you guys do it, because you've got to focus 100%. I drove in SCCA, which is minor, but I lost concentration, and believe it or not, this is going to sound crazy, I didn't even remember the next turn at what, it sounds crazy though.
Yeah. Over the years, you talk to drivers, and obviously, I can make mistakes and have made mistakes as well as anybody, but to be a pro driver for as long as I have, you probably make less mistakes, less bigger mistakes, and as fewer. So I'm not perfect by any means, but the biggest thing is getting a routine that works for you, that gets you mentally prepared to get in the car. And this is something I'll talk about later, is traffic safety, but getting your head in the game when you get in your street car is the same thing. But getting in the race car, a lot of guys almost get disabled, and they have a routine which is ridiculous. Some guys are very superstitious, but they get these, you remember Sergio Garcia, the golfer? Sergio used to have like 27 different twitches before he hit the ball, and it just disabled the guy. Brilliant, brilliant golfer, but he had to figure it out, and he's coming back now. But it's the same thing with some of the race car drivers, and very, very good pro drivers. They have a routine. Well, suddenly in an endurance race, something happens. It's not all like, oh, he'll come in now. It's like, car's coming in. You got to go. You got to get ready. Get your freaking helmet on now. And it's like they get absolutely mentally discombobulated. They do a lousy stint because they couldn't go through their routine to get it. For me, I figured out some of that early on because I did endurance racing very early. And for me, I'll put the mic down for a second. All I have to do, I said, you've got to get your head in the game. For me, I just have a trigger. I call it a trigger. And they're always a bit sticky. When I put them on, and I do this. That is my trigger. Once I've done this, my helmet's already on. So the last thing I do, and I go, okay, my head's there, and that's it. It's simple, and I've got to have the gloves on anyway, so it was just a simple trigger to stretch the gloves out. That was my trigger for mentally do that. But some of the guys, it's a mental game. Tony says it's a mental game. Just like when something happens on the track, if you make a mistake in a corner and you carry that with you to the next corner, It's just, golf is very similar mentally to racing. People think, why do you bring up golf? Because mentally, it's absolutely similar to racing. You may not play and it doesn't matter, but the point is, a golfer's head, did you see the Masters? That was a mental breakdown, which we've never seen at the Masters. The best golfer in the world loses it, basically mentally. The guy can still play golf. The next day, he would have shot 60 on the same course, but he lost it on that moment. Same thing with the driver. You make a mistake in turn 2, you carry it to turn 3, I'll guarantee you'll crash in turn 4. And it's just that way. It's a huge mental game, racing. And these twitches that I call them, some drivers have, can be quite disabling. So if you're a driver, it doesn't matter whether you're running track days or chump car, you just got to get your mind into the game. What Tony's saying is so right. And the same thing for a mechanic. Same thing for a mechanic. If you've got something on your mind and you could possibly forget to do something on the car, and they're working under a car for hours and hours, they've got 157 different things to do in an hour, and if one of them isn't quite torqued correctly or they forget one particular nut, we have to trust them implicitly. Jochen raced for years. Same thing. We have to trust the guys, and it's a huge, huge responsibility that they have. And I can't tell you, I always say this, and it's so sincere. You know, we put our lives in their hands, and they fret, they worry. We crash and they think they've done something wrong, they are crying in their cornflakes for weeks. And a guy like Tony, I would hate it to happen. That's why Tony is the way Tony is, because I'm sure that that's his worst nightmare. And it's never going to happen with this guy, because he's that good. And I mean that sincerely.
You're freaking me out, man. Just don't put it on. Don't put it out there.
So you're good.
I caught him doing this. Look at him. Just standing there, you know what I mean?
That's not me. Who's that, Alan?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Alan, yeah.
This is Nürburgring. Why the GT1 came about? Right there. The McLaren F1 GTR. I mean, you've got to compete, right? And when somebody raises the ante that much, kind of like Ford did at Lama, what is it? I was going to say 96, but 65, 6, 7, 8, whatever it was. And then what did Porsche do? They raised the ante after that Ford did, and they built the 917. And then what happened to the 917? 3-liter limit. 3-liter limit. So you've got a 4.5 ending in 5, you know, you go up to 5-liter, and then they go, nope, there's going to be a 3-liter limit now, and so no more 917. So, you know, we win Le Mans in 1970, we win Le Mans in 1971, in which I think were both non-factory cars.
They were both Salzburg cars, yeah.
Where do you think some of this comes from? This guy's incredible with his books, you know. We learned, by the way, we met, Randy and I met over this car. I mean, that's why I had to do all of this. Randy called me 10 or 12 years ago, and he's going, I'm going to do a book, and I need a picture of a GT1. I'm like, Randy Leffingwell? I mean, even me, you've been around racing forever, it doesn't matter. Randy Leffingwell, you know, all of his books. So it turned out we're good friends. Mercedes CLK, I think they call it, R. The fly car, as we say. Car couldn't stay on the track. And then another McLaren GT1 and GT2. And by the way, GT1's a rebodied GT2. Really, it's a 993 chassis, twin turbocharged, Mezger-based, Valentin Schaefer-based engine, and I'll explain that later. And you want to look at Davidoff. You remember Davidoff, or you know Davidoff cigarettes? It's just big tobacco. They cut the sponsorship. You couldn't have it on race cars. They didn't want tobacco on race cars. You know what I mean? So what they did was every time you had to go to a certain race, they changed it to Dayoff instead of Davidoff, just because it wasn't illegal anymore, and you didn't have to change all of the decals and everything. But I'm a Porsche guy, but look how beautiful that car is. I mean, and the GT1, watching those chariots, this GT1, GT3R and that GT1 battle that out on a track, some of the best days in racing, in my opinion. There's when we first saw the GT1 at Lama, I mean, it was incredible at the test, which is usually a month before. And Andy's correct. We used to just sweat it out at the pre-qualification, worrying we're not going to get into the show. I mean, imagine spending all that money to prepare.
Yeah, the pre-qualification is nothing like it now. If you get to pre-qualify, you get to Le Mans. Years ago, it was like Indy qualifying for every class. And there was a bar, and there was the guy on the bubble for the whole day, or 2 days sometimes, and that was it. It was massively important. And if you had a crash at pre-qual, you were done early on, and you didn't get a time. And at the last 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes of the day was when you had to put the time down. I mean, it was ridiculous because the tires would only last one lap. You had major qualifying tires. You basically had to crawl around the racetrack at 30 miles an hour till you got to Porsche curves and then go. And by the time you got back to Porsche curves, which is almost at the end of a lap at Le Mans because the track is 8 miles long, you were done. You know, you were sliding through the end of Porsche curves, and you knew they just didn't last. The tires were ridiculous. The Michelins back then, they were just crazy, the qualifying tires. They got rid of all that now. You don't have those qualifying tires anymore. But back then, the Michelin were producing these insane qualifying tires. I mean, it was so different. I mean, you'd be running like a 4-minute 12 lap on the regular tire, and then you'd run a 4:05. That's how different it was. It was unbelievably different. So and you couldn't practice with them because they were only good for 1 lap. So you just have to do it on faith. Like, I think it'll stick, you know. It's amazing. But it's not like that anymore, you know. These kids just don't know today, you know.
Speaking of team orders, you know, there's a lot of politics that go on in racing. We weren't allowed to have the best Michelin tires. There's different sets of Michelin tires.
Wait. That's the biggest understatement that he said all day, and he just blew right over it. There is politics in racing. You had to dwell on that. You had to let that sink in. That is the biggest understatement that he said all day. Okay, you can carry on now.
And the problem is knowing about it. If we didn't realize there was a better set of race Michelin, I mean, we talked about that some yesterday, but very lightly. Jochen, it bothers me because we're a factory team, and by the way, there's only so many sets available, and sometimes there's no tires available.
Well, yeah, we ran into that problem in '97, and when we talked about it yesterday, it came back to my mind. And the factory, you know, when we actually beat the factory with their own car at their own game, we were actually not allowed to use the last generation Michelin tires, which actually made us work even harder on it. We were like, okay, all right, just give us whatever, you know, you give us, and then. But there's definitely politics in there. So.
Do you see why he's turning red? Because nobody says anything about the factory. So we're careful what we say. We're very careful what we say, and I'm not as careful. So basically, I mean, it's statute of limitations is gone, but Alvin can still call and chew me out. You don't want to get a call from Alvin. And you hear Alvin's retired? Yeah, right. Right. So every time there is a new car, and especially at Lama, right, because they control the rules. Even to this day, they control the rules in the U.S., right? American Lama, yeah. The French are controlling this. You show up with a car like this. What freaked me out, Jochen, was when the GT1 came over. We didn't know if we were going to pass tech, did we? Because we didn't know what they'd expect of us. Are they going to make us put a roll cage? You know.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was a little bit of a risk we took, but it all worked out, you know. So Alvin was working in the background, so it got taken care of.
Yeah, that's true. Again, that's why it's important, right? Who you know and who you don't talk about. You show up with a new car. And they're supposed to be a street car, right, for the race homologation and whatnot. Well, if you look, this is not a street car. It's got a license plate on it. But Porsche was smart, okay? They built 3 race cars, and 2 of them were in the paddock, and the other one's sitting in front with a license plate on it. Okay, it's a street car, drive it. You may not make it over the speed bump, but... So this is in the paddock. Now listen, you never, ever get around a manufacturer, Corvette, McLaren, you never get around a manufacturer, Porsche, in the first time the cars run. The next year, they give it to their customers, so the information's out. The wings get covered, the suspension gets covered, but they allowed me to walk in and take photographs of the car because we've worked together before. This is the 96. This is the first time, well, second time now, that the GT1 had been shown to the public, and now they're in this livery, right, from the beer sponsor and Mobil 1. So what I was doing was I was walking around the car. I'm amazed because all we knew were GT2s since we've had the 962s. It's been a while, and which is the prototype race car. I'm walking around the car, I'm looking at it, and I'm also amazed by their garage, believe it or not. I was just looking at everything, their tools and everything, the way they had it set up, and how they were prepping the car, what they were doing to prep the car, because you got to realize I'm learning also. You have somebody like Mezger, who's head of engineering, and he's the one that gets credited of designing that engine, not the guy that works under him, or Valentin Schaefer, who really designed the air-cooled engine, or so now as I've gotten older, I look at who really gets credit for things, and it isn't generally the people. It's usually the lower down, out of the limelight people that actually thought of the design. And when I think of something on one of these cars and it comes out and they say, oh, it's the Callas method, it's still really, I mean, yeah, it is, but you know what? There are a lot of people involved in these things, mechanics that work with me that have ideas, and like the Volt, or I'm going to go off on things like the Volt, where it was come up. If you really learn who really came up with things in history, it makes me wonder. I'd sit around thinking about this stuff now, about who really thought of things. And it's helped me come up with designs, and it's helped me come up with stuff, and respect who really the brains behind these things are. I'm sorry if you guys want to. So speaking of that, Roland Kuzmal, an engineer at Porsche, and you go visit him at Weissach, and he's got his dog there, and he's down to earth, But these guys are the brains behind this. Franz Conrad, I call him a gypsy. He's a Porsche race car driver, team owner, with always the turquoise and white cars. And now he's looking because he took possession of a GT1. So as I'm walking around the driver's side of the car, I look down and I see this. And this was kind of interesting for me the whole week there. Now, I've told a number of PCA groups about this, and I spoke at Parade this year, and I spoke at Tech Tactics, and they wanted me to come to Tech Tactics East. And I was like, can't go. But I tell people about this, and I asked the engineer, the head engineer at Porsche, I said, what is made in flocked? And he laughs, and he tells everybody, Tony wants to know what made in flocked means, and they all laugh, and they make me wait until a week later to tell me, you'll find out when you need to know, that whole thing. Well, I come back at the end of the race, and we're packing up, we're leaving, and I say, can you please tell me what made in flocked means? And he's like, okay, I'll tell you what made in flocked means. And I'm going to let Randy, after I say this, I want you to correct me, because I'm not totally sure, but this is what they told me. They go, Tony, there's Stuttgart Porsche, and then there's Weissach Porsche, right, the R&D department. But Weissach is not really what they do is they name it by the nearest village. There is no town right there. Weissach is just an area, and the nearest town is flocked. Actually, Weissach. So they called it Weissach, but it's actually flocked. That's where R&D is. Now, you want to correct that, or?
You're close. When Ferry Porsche bought the land, it was in the community of Weissach. As the track expanded and they enlarged the test circuit, they moved further and further south. And so as the competition department needed more space, they kind of annexed the south end of the track, which literally is in the community of Flocked. And it became this best kept secret joke about the fact that everybody knows the name Weissach, but we're from Flocked.
They actually were proud of Flocked, and it's kind of cool, nobody knowing, like a little secret society, So here's the front of the car. I'm going to talk about this when we do this. I'm not going to say evening, but this afternoon we're going to pull the panels off the car. But we have 2 main and 2 reserve fuel pumps. We have a carbon fiber fuel cell, and again, I just was taking photos of everything. And they make sure before you leave, you don't share this with anybody. And if now I am. It's been long enough. I think we're okay. We have one there to design off of. But what we have here is an opening where the air in the wheelhouse liner can exit the wheelhouse. Well, at Le Mans, they don't allow you to have an opening, so you have to put in a grill. Just like Alex Job's team for the front fenders, when they put in louvers up on the top of the front fenders, American Le Mans made them block those. Yeah, this is all competition between us, and so we're laughing when they have to do something I have to undo something they did. This is very interesting. We have a little trunk area. And again, what do you think that's for? It's homologation, right? Like the 917 has a spare tire. You know what I mean? And they made them run, drivers used to be real drivers where they could fix something. I don't want them touching the car, to be honest with you. It's not their job, But they do spot things every once in a while. And it's embarrassing because we're like, we're good, we got this. And then Andy's walking by and he's like, that brake rotor looks strange. And sure enough, something's wrong. And I'm like, how did he catch that? And I go and beat my guys up because I'm like, how did you miss that? And the driver caught it. I don't know. I think it's luck. It's just luck. So simulated rear window, basically. And now I want you to notice how the car is not flat on the side. And Randy's going to talk about this in his presentation, so please understand the flat side of the car and how it's not flat, because he will explain. And honestly, Randy, I didn't know that till yesterday when you talked about it. So thank you for doing that. But if you notice that there's a wing, well, yes, Andy, there is a wing, but the front fender, and there is a pod right here, and this is stuck out from the door. So he'll explain why. And then on the Evo car, it's different. You'll see. There's our nemesis, the Panos, along with that McLaren GT. Have you noticed anybody other than us is my nemesis? I don't want to work. They're all enemies. Okay? Don't get near me. Don't talk to me. Stay away. Don't even look in my tent area. That's how it has to be. It's all or nothing with a race mechanic. And I don't want anything to do with anybody else. And I don't want to do anything with the media or anybody coming up to talk to me. Yeah, there are kids that come up. I want to let them. I want to talk to them about. I want to bring them up. Let them sit in the race car. I mean, that's a good thing. But everybody else needs to go to hell. The Panos. I hated this car, not because it was our competitor, because it was so loud. It was so bloody loud, and it hurt. I don't know how did the drivers handle that?
Well, yeah, sorry. It was loud. The loudest thing, though, dude, the Mazda rotary engine. That when
They hurt
if you were
inside.
going, yeah, you wanted to be in a prototype to get by it really fast. But if you were in a GT car, like early days, I think with Larry Schumacher's Porsche 95, they were running a similar speed to us. And if you were going down the straightaway and that exhaust pipe was next to your ear, you just wanted to shove them straight off the racetrack. It was like absolutely ear-splittingly loud. But wasn't that the worst? They were
Yeah,
the
the
worst. I think
Mazda-
they were the worst. But the panels just vibrated your insides out.
Yeah.
You felt it. You heard it and you felt the panels. I agree. It was really loud, obnoxious.
I told everybody over the years that the Mazdas actually hurt your insides. I don't know how to describe that, but when they went by, and it's a resonance that so pit lane of Sears Point, somewhere here. There were only a couple of cars in the U.S. of the GT1s. There was Rohr and there was Beitzik in Canada. And Beitzik just ran, you know what it was? It was a guy that was so wealthy that he just had his own racing, or he just come and play with me. I'm sorry, I know it was Canadian American, but he just wanted to play, and he was the guy.
Really nice guy.
And they came up with the belts and everything. Serpentine belts. I mean, imagine coming up with that. Yeah, Beitzik is who kind of came up with that. So, and that's, by the way, notice the round lights because I couldn't see the side of the car. That's the 96 version. So that's the first car. There's the first time I saw her. Was in Germany. I went over to work. I was working for Rohr, and they said, we need you to prepare this car for Le Mans. So I was like, sure, and so we went to Weissach. We learned about the GT1 mechanically, and then I just took it apart. And it was in the colors of this Wilkinson sword. If you notice, it's actually it is a razor, if you look at it from the top. Pedro Chavez. Stefan Ortelli, which by the way, so that's 97, because the factory ran these cars in 96 at Lama. That's their car. Then 97, they gave it to everybody, well, sold it to everybody to run. So then privateers had them. And then 98, Stefan actually went to run the factory cars, the 98 Evo. They're not even Evo cars, they're 98. They're full carbon chassis. They're totally different. And we'll show you that when we pull the bodywork off. And then Kellener's, which by the way, his father raced years ago, and we just call him Joey. Like Tommy Kendall, I used to call Tommy 20 years ago, and he wouldn't even say his name. It was Pedro. Hey, you've reached Pedro. Leave me a message. But I don't know why, but so Tommy Kendall was Pedro, and Ralph Kellener's was Joey. I mean, just interesting names, and Andy was Andy. There's Stefan. I'm not one for pictures, and so I was sitting there preparing the car. This is in Germany, and I stayed at a relative's house down at Hanau am Main outside of Frankfurt. And so I would stay there and I would drive up to Stuttgart, and everybody was like, "You're gonna drive every day?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from Texas. First of all, we're used to driving an hour to go anywhere." And so I would just drive up to Leverkusen or Köln, and I would work on the race team. And the only time I did move, I stayed in Cincinnati, and I worked for Jochen there, and I learned what weather was like. I thought Texas was weather. You guys have winters like I've never seen in Cincinnati. So there's Stefan Ortelli. And so he wanted to take a photo, so he grabbed the steering wheel. And I'm right there, I'm thinking, this is the corniest thing I've ever done. But now I look back and I'm like, Stefan Ortelli, I mean, another Andy Pilgrim, you know, these guys, back shot.
We ran together. Remember, we ran together in 96.
Oh,
Stefan
that's
and
when
I
we
and you
met.
at Rook.
No, we
At
didn't
Rook.
meet there.
At
We
Rook.
met in 90.
No, we met before then, but I ran with Stefan before the 97, in 96, yeah.
I forget these things. That's we go back many years, so hence we're together now talking about this stuff. Notice the carbon fiber brake rotors. Now, when you say, "Oh, I have carbon fiber brake rotors on my street car," no, you don't. Well, unless you changed them. This is true carbon fiber, okay, from Carbon Industry, F1 company that built them. Yes, I'm not that strong. This is very light. If you take a 380 millimeter brake rotor, you're not going to be able to pick it up that easily. And by the way, those bobbins are directional. If you look, there's a slot in them, the titanium bobbins. And Bob Wallach called in, and this was Petit Le Mans, and he goes, "I have no brakes, and something's wrong with the right front of the car." Yeah, well, it blew up, is what happened. The whole rotor exploded because the hat came apart. And then the rotor came apart, and there was nothing left in that corner. So I was really honored to work with the late Bob Wallach. You know, now he's rest in peace. But at the time, I mean, Bob Wallach, factory driver and all, you know.
Remember? Oh, just a quick point. You may not remember this, but Bob Wallach wasn't there. None of your drivers were there, and it was like the Thursday, and Brad Kettler comes up to me, and I was running a BMW that year, and he said, "Hey, you got a minute? Can you get in the car?" And I remember I was in that car in practice because Brad wanted to test some stuff out in the car, and I ran a practice session in that car. You remember?
No.
Yeah, and that was before the race at Petit. Yeah, so that was probably just something you may have forgotten, but Brad put me in the car and said, "Yeah, our drivers aren't here, Andy, can you do it?" And so he just stuck me in the car, and I was driving for BMW factory that weekend, and they didn't care, so I got in the car.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
You know,
98.
those things
with
happen.
PTG.
Those things happen where we'll go testing somewhere, and if he's a friend, like just happens to be Pierre Kleinubing or somebody from an Acura team, and I ran the tin top Audis for a little while, could come out and drive as a friend like that. There are things that happen, and you get experiences, and you get wisdom from another perspective, you know what I mean? But yes, there are competitors, but then there's friends that are driving. Like, I don't watch a lot of sports, but I don't have the time. But if you have, I watch a lot of cycling though, and you have one guy that'll be on one team one year, and then on another team another year, and then, you know, you're not total enemies, you know.
One point to that, on certain teams that I've been on, that never would have been allowed. I would absolutely have not been allowed to get in another car, whether it was in a different class or not. So most of the factory teams I've been on, as full factory, you couldn't, if you asked, you'd probably be, you know, that wouldn't, you'd probably almost get fired just even asking to drive another manufacturer's car like that. But on this particular weekend, those guys, that was fine, because I was a stand-in again for the factory BMW team. I was a stand-in, and they said no problem. So it was, as Tony says, you definitely want to use guys. When he says friendly, he means people that hopefully will not mess the car up.
Yeah, you got to bring the car home safe. Gearbox with straight cut gears, very unusual, did not come out with this car, was ending up, we put them in later. Helical cut gears are normally what you have. You have a gear with helical cut gear. They're quiet. The problem is a straight cut gear or a helical cut gear actually will take too much energy. Okay, so when you go to a straight cut gear, yes, it's very noisy. Who cares? You know, let the driver put in more earplugs or something. It's not a big deal, but it takes up less power. It's a race car, exactly. What are you here to do? Have fun? No. Okay, so this is our air inlet to the turbocharger, and yes, it's a little unusual to have 90 degree, but you do what you've got to do. This is right there at the bulkhead of the GT1. There's the cockpit, and here's the engine, and we have the compressor and the turbine. Another photo of that car. I can't do this without letting Jeff explain the situation about what we went through and when you bought the car 4 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. I know what you're referring to. It was back 4 years ago, almost not quite to the day, but this time 4 years ago. The GT1 had been, we live in Orange County, Newport Beach, down in California, and I've been buying and selling cars for 40 years and had been begun a few years earlier building a 911 collection. Never thought under any circumstances we'd have a GT1 in our collection, but this car had been, I use the term laying around, which sounds kind of funny, but laying around Orange County for about a year as of 4 years ago. And I had been over to Porsche Motorsport one day, and Eric Bloss, who's one of the people there, showed me the car, and he wasn't, you know, pitching the sale of it or anything, because it was in there to have some work done on it. I'm not even sure what it was, but he said, "Why don't you sit in it?" Well, cool. Gee, this is a lot like a 993. I mean, you kind of look around when you get in there, and it's not. And I've driven some, you know, totally purpose-built race cars, which is what this is, but used at least. This is on a 993 base. So I got out, and you know, that was that. And then I don't know, a few months later, the car moved over to another location in Orange County, a sort of all-purpose, an outfit that was car dealer, service, sales, you know. And so I saw the car there and just walked right past it. And but as time wore on, I began thinking, I wonder why this car is still here. Why hasn't some? I mean, it was 4 years ago, and things have changed from a collecting standpoint in 4 years on Porsches. But something as unusual as this, I just thought, well, gosh, why hasn't somebody bought this car? And so, to add one more thing to what I hadn't mentioned yesterday, so I, you know, kind of had an interest, but what really sort of tipped the scales, because I wasn't sure, and nobody was sure what the car was worth. It certainly wasn't going to be cheap, but one of the factory team cars, one of the 1996 cars of the three built, was being sold at the Amelia Island auction in Florida, which just occurred. You might recall, if you're following it closely, what, 3 weeks ago, a month ago now, was Amelia Island. And where Jerry Seinfeld is, all of his cars sold, or all but one sold. Incredible. Well, one of the factory team cars was going to be sold there, and it was sold, and I won't get into specific numbers, but it sold at a level that kind of surprised me as to how, well, I won't say inexpensive, but how low the price was. And because factory team cars are always considered to be more valuable than privateer cars, it established at least some logical place to, you know, value this car. And so I made an offer, and the offer, you know, after some back and forth, it was accepted. But I didn't want to buy the car without having it thoroughly inspected and make sure that there wasn't some reason why no one else had stepped up and bought the car that I was unaware of. And so Tony, having all the experience that he has, and we weren't well acquainted at the time, but I got in touch with him and asked him if he'd come from Torrance down to Orange County to do a pre-purchase inspection on the car. And kindly enough, he did so and went through the car and was, very, very thorough as he is. And basically didn't find anything wrong with it. Certainly found some things that, hey, you might want to do this or do that, but nothing that was going to be inordinately expensive. And that was what I needed to give me the assurance that I wasn't buying a pig in a poke. And that's, 4 years later, that's why the car is sitting here, because my wife, Marge, approved, at least put up with me. And that's why we have the car today. Tony.
Thank you, Jeff. Those are the inside. Those are the inside stories and information I think make this event better. Just from Andy and from Randy and Jochen and you and yourself. Las Vegas, there's not much more I can tell you about these pictures, guys, but other than tell you some stories of like what we're doing, of what's going on at the time. Brad used to say that you could tell the time of day depending on where my legs are sticking out of it underneath the car, because I worked my way around the car and I wanted to make sure the car was safe for Andy and Alan McNish, these guys, to get into the car, Jochen, because I take it very seriously, because if something went wrong, I don't know how I could live with myself. In Daytona, by the way, and Lama, these Sebring somewhat are incredibly stressful races, because when you're putting a car through 24-hour pace, and people and drivers and everything, it's extremely taxing on everybody. And what happens is we end up, things break on a car. I want you to understand what a Daytona does and Le Mans does. It's the lifetime of a car. Okay, we rebuild a complete car before a Daytona race and after. New wheel bearings, new gearbox, engine, everything gets rebuilt. Okay, no, the headlights stay the same if you want to argue that fact. There are things, the chassis is the same, but we look for cracks in the chassis and we weld up cracks, and we learn where the street cars are going to crack in 100 or 200,000 miles. I said to somebody yesterday, bless you, I said, this is the best chassis that we've ever had, the 911 chassis. I mean, no other chassis endured what these have. I mean, yes, I was 4 or 5 when my dad had a Porsche shop, and I've followed these cars. No nepotism involved in this chassis. I mean, it's incredible. So what happens is you get a car that you're competing against. No offense, the BMW is a unibody, but the Corvettes, it's a tube frame. Pratt & Miller built this car, right? I mean, it's a tube frame car. It's not really with a VIN put on it. That right there is a true freaking street car with a race engine and with race suspension. And yes, we put some body on it, but when I pull the bodywork off, you're going to see the 993. Okay, so to me, that's a huge, tremendous difference than a Panos that was purposely built for the track and we're racing against it. There's a little bit of passion or anger that goes along with that, because I'm competing against something. This is the same street car that you have outside. What I love is in '98, I come back from Le Mans, and I'm watching TV. I don't watch TV very often. And I'm watching this commercial, remember, from Porsche? And they have the assembly line, and it just switches off and goes to the race teams. And then this just goes to a customer. I'm going to cry. I mean, it's just incredible. So,
pardon me for interrupting, but I saw this photograph yesterday, Randy, and I'm aware of the road-going GT1 that was built actually prior to the 3 race cars in order to provide the homologation road car necessary for the eligibility of the GT1. And I'm aware of the road-going version of the LM98 GT1, the all-carbon car, but I've never seen a photograph of this car before, and I didn't realize that there was a GT1 Evo road car that had to be built, again, for homologation purposes, to run the second batch of 3 factory team GT1s. Could you just explain that a bit?
Yeah, that's exactly right. But in fact, the street version of first generation was completed after the 3 race cars. Their priority was to go racing and then to meet the rules. And I don't mean that to say that Porsche was trying to cheat. It's just they knew they had more work to do. When they talked about the original street version of 96 GT1, they were going to put a production 300 horsepower motor in it. And that's how it was billed, and that's how it was promoted to the public. And there were 1 or 2 orders. Of course, it went to Le Mans. It did very well at 580 horsepower, I think.
Very close. Close enough.
And it did well enough that there were immediately 17 cash deposits. So when those road cars were delivered, customer cars, they had 550 horsepower, and everybody was very happy. But the FIA rules allow an evolution version after homologation is done, after the production has finished. The next year you can bring out an evolution version that basically improves subtle things. There can be some engine changes, nothing radical interior, some suspension changes, some brake changes, some subtle body changes. It's called the Evo. To homologate it, 1 more series production car, and that's the one Porsche kept. They also have the very original #1 96 road car, although I think that's the one that's coming up for auction. Is that right? I thought I saw that somewhere. I know somebody who's rabidly interested in it, and he sent me some email about it.
Yeah, I did.
And then there's one, so far as I know, there was just a single Strassen version of the 98 car. Yeah. Yeah, there had to be, yeah. Yes, there had to be.
And they all,
Yeah, that's the 98, such as it is. That's the 98 911 sort of GT1. Tony Hatter joked about the fact, Tony Hatter was the guy who designed the 993. So when the project got approved, Wendell and Wiedeking called him in and said, Herr Hatter, you know the most important thing with this, and the reason we want you involved is this race car must look like a 911. So Tony came in and he did the work, and he always characterizes this, well, we did the 96 and it was a 993, we did the 1997 and it was a 993, and we did the 98, which was nothing like a 911. But then Wiedeking said, no, put the new headlights on it. They'll think it's a 996.
I mean, who knows that stuff? By the way, can you please tell them why you know this and what you've been doing?
I've been the luckiest guy in the world. I got, about 20 years ago, I got a chance to do a book called Porsche Legends. And I come out of newspapers. I had 22 years of experience with newspapers by the time, and working for newspapers is all about, as Tony said a moment ago, and I just sort of did a big cheer here. When you work for a newspaper, the object is to get the story and get the story correctly. And so it's always taught us to keep asking and keep asking and keep asking the questions. If someone says, well, he did it, well, who's he, and how do I find him? And if that person says, well, no, I really didn't, I was just this part of it, but he did it. I had done a monumental amount of research before I went to Germany to do my first book. And I got paired up with a fellow called Klaus Reichert, who was the head of the press department. Klaus had been there in the days of some of Porsche's greatest racing. And he was put in, he was given the role of gate guardian to this American journalist who was coming doing the next book on Porsche. And I had my first 3 or 4 interviews, I had just prepared pretty thoroughly. And in each of the interviews, the people I were interviewing several times during the interview saying, how did you know about that? How do you know about these things? No one's ever asked me about this program. And that impressed Klaus. So that book came out, and that really kind of established my credentials as a thorough researcher and a detailed interviewer. In most of these cases, I asked for 2 hours. With Norbert Zinger, I walked in and I said, well, I'll talk about 3 things. And he said, what are those? And he started to laugh. He said, oh, the dirty tricks. And he turned to his secretary and said, cancel my morning, bring in coffee. And I left there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon with Reichert. And at that point, they knew that I was very serious about what I was doing, and that's led to the success I've had I've done more than 250 interviews with Porsche engineers, designers, racers, managers, employees, racing mechanics, assembly line people, and it's all about finding out things like that.
Just being around Randy the last 10 or 12 years, I've learned so much about Porsche. What I wanted him to tell you about is his new book, the motorsport book.
Well, that did lead to a pretty nice compliment at the end of one of the projects. I was doing a 60-year history of Porsche, and I'd worked with Porsche's new head of archives, a guy called Dieter Landenberger. And I took him and his wife and the photo archivist, Jens Torner, to dinner that night. And both Jens and Dieter looked at each other and smiled and said, "Is now the time?" And Jens said, "Yeah." I said, "Randy, we have a book idea for you." Well, if you're a book author, that's about the most terrifying thing you can hear. Oh, good, the outhouses of Bavaria. The covered bridges of the Schwarzwald. Yippee. And Dieter looked at me and he said, "We'd like you to do Porsche's racing history."
What do you think?
And I thought, this isn't just you two guys, is it? No, 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 it's the motorsports department, it's the press department, and it's the marketing department. We want you to do the Porsche racing history. So that's what most of these last 150 of the 250 interviews have been for, is this particular book. David Bull is going to publish it. It'll come out, volume 1 will come out beginning of 18, volume 2 will come out the end of 18. The original contract called for one volume of 300 pages, but as David sent me the contract, he laughed. He said, no, Dieter and I have already talked. This is 2 volumes. This is 1,000 pages. You just go ahead with it. Yeah, and so that's sort of been the magnificent obsession of the last 4 years. I'll do a couple of trips this fall. I'm down to the last dozen interviews I really need to do. And just had a brainstorm, I told you about it, a brainstorm of how to get some of the most critical German personalities. And then I can do Alvin and his cronies. But it's in the stretch. When I first got the assignment from these guys, I thought, oh, this is easy, this will be wonderful. I've done all kinds of interviews, 1948 to the present. And he just said, no, Randy, no. This book starts in 1898. Ferdinand Porsche, when he built Semper Vivus, he raced it. Porsche racing is 1898 to the present. So that's why we've timed it to come out in 18. It'll be 120 years of Porsche racing.
It'll be 4 volumes.
Please don't say
him?
that.
Did you see
Don't
him?
let David hear that. Please don't let David hear that. Please don't let David.
He's interviewed everybody. He sits down with these drivers. Hans Hermann, you sit with him. So we show at Lama. Oh yeah, by the way, so when I started riding, well, again, Tom's the writer, but when we started riding for excellence, I'll never forget Toldrin or somebody saying, never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That was a motto on the wall of Sports Illustrated for a number of years.
I'm like, no. Truth is the truth, this story. Okay, so Le Mans, we show up as a technician. We show up a week and a half early, right? And this is what it looks like. It's beautiful. There's nobody there. It's quiet. Because I don't know if you've been to a 24-hour race. It's like being in a bowl of noise and sound between, especially at Le Mans, with all the grandstands and everything around you. And it's nerve-wracking for that long, especially since I have a tether. It's like a, what do they call that, home, where I can't leave the house, you know, and I get the ankle boot, which is my radio. I cannot leave the radio because if the car comes to pit or there's a problem and he calls in, I need to be there for him. You know, like he talks about, they, believe it or not, they're actually very sensitive people. They need to be talked to at times. I
don't talk much, you know that.
No, you don't talk much at all. Sometimes I'm like, are you there? You okay? And no, I like that about him. Some people talk too much.
Oh, huge.
Just like, I'm just like, just shut up, drive the car. No, I do. I'm like, shut up, drive the car. Because it gets to be, and I love pissing them off, because they'll just only drive better, usually. Alan McNish is one of them. We always wanted Alan to get mad, because he would just go fast. So there's Le Mans a week later, right? Week and a half later with the whole circus and the whole crew. Everybody's there. And then our cars are lined up, and the stress is, you know, if you don't understand deadline, you do when the green flag's about to stop, drop, because there is no more touching the car. You get to a point where you realize you can't fix the car any longer. So Lama is interesting. You know the French, they stick by their rules and they stick by things that they believe is real. Like they have the best automobile race in the world. Yeah, there's F1 and yes, there's Indy. But I think the French have the best automobile race and the best bicycle race, you know? And they've stuck by it. So what they do is they make you load the car up on the transporter and take it to the center of town to scrutineering. And this is what it looks like. I was in the car, and I had actually ridden in the car in the transporter because it's not very far. And then they opened the back door of the transporter, and as we're rolling the car out over the lift gate, I'm sitting in it, and I snapped this photo. And it's just incredible what it looks like, with everybody wanting to see the race cars. And they truly love racing. It's in their blood, you know. It isn't just, you know, the sport. I don't know what you say, but it's neat for me, especially when they love the mechanics, you know. I had a good time. So basically, the McLaren F1 GTR next to us pitted, and I snap a shot. I'm out in pit lane. I come up behind the car. Notice the fueler is watching the guy venting the tank. The guy venting is watching his also. So what happens is they both shut on at the same time. You're not allowed to touch the car until the fueling's finished, because any spark, any static electricity can set a fire off. I fueled for a number of races in Europe, and it's a weird thing that goes on when you're dealing with 26.5 gallons of fuel right there in front of you, and it's over your shoulders, and in the fire suit it doesn't last long. And I'll tell you why. Because the Ferrari team next to us, they had an incident, and it's just peeling off, if you know what I'm talking about. It was bad. And then you fuel after that. So it's a little freaky to fuel, to be dealing with it, because the red head, the fueling head is all red, and so we call it a red head. Anything that can create that to stay open could be fuel everywhere, and there's red hot components. So what happens is the fueler watches here, because as soon as this hits 3 seconds of gurgling, the breather guy pulls off, the vent guy, and he pulls off when he pulls off. It's really in tandem, and it's incredible to watch fuelers operate. I don't ever want to be a fueler again. I just don't care for that position. Let me work on anything on the race car, but I'm not going to fuel, because it's a lot of pressure too. Because if you do anything wrong, then they blame you for fueling too long or too short or whatever. Weissach, this is the new Weissach. I'll show you photos of the old Weissach. There's the old Weissach, actually. Didn't realize I had it so quick. There's no photography allowed at Weissach, but I was in my rental car, and I just kind of snapped above the dashboard. As you see, I didn't play by the rules very well, as my wife says. And you can see back in the back the Cayenne test ground and everything, how they designed or helped. Obviously, this was in Leipzig, right, in Germany, but this is in Weissach, which is kind of cool still to see the cars laying around. And look, there's the Porsche transporter for the race. There's the engines. They were preparing for our GT3R, and that's the 996 car that was coming out, and we were getting the first one, so I went over to get trained on it. And again, those are the engines. Porsche engineers described something to me that was very interesting. Singer is like, now, Herr Callas, you understand the combustion chamber in the GT3R is totally different, and you will listen to it and hear it when we start it up. I'm just like, absolutely, please start it up. Gearboxes, Daytona written on the gearbox, integral slave cylinder, very different for us at the time. Instead of a fork-operated clutch, it's all hydraulic. Again, we're looking at the GT3R engines, and if you look at Weissach, it's kind of cool because they have photos of, you know, like the 98 car, and they have the tag engine laying around. This is engine disassembly. Same rails that you see in your modern cars, believe it or not. There's the tag motor, Technique Avant-Garde, which Randy will talk about a little bit later. That's the engine management system in that car I'll talk about. Not that car, but the same engine company. There's the GT3Rs ready for assembly. They cut
For those of you who don't understand the term body in white, that is a body in white.
Yeah, there's a body in white. It will be shipped to you if you have enough money. By the way, you don't understand, for people that do have money, they come into this game and they think, oh, I'll buy a race car from Porsche, and they call it Porsche, and there is no, Jochen, you have to explain how it doesn't matter who you are and your money. It's whether you're going to race or not, right?
Exactly. It's even if it's a cost-intensive hobby, but Porsche is not just working with everybody who comes in with a big checkbook. I mean, they want, their cars to win. And if you look at the last few teams, I mean, Porsche is helping out tremendously too with teams. So,
I mean, this is a small company. Volkswagen is massive, okay? Well, leave it to them. Look at the wins. Look at the wreaths. You know what I mean? It's a small company that goes way back. The same guys are still around, and Randy's going to talk about that. I mean, it's a family. So there's the cars about ready to be finished with the lights, and then.
We'll talk about the fact that Jochen decided the most selfish act, period, I've ever had in racing happen when Jochen and I are leading a championship, and I'll embellish on this a little bit. Sorry? Unselfish. What did I say? Thank you. I was absolutely saying unselfish. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm going to talk about it more later. It's an amazing gesture, if you want to call it that. It's a very simplistic way of putting it, but it's it just got us to a place with the getting out of the race car. But what happened at Mosport, and it happened at Mosport, was the race car was just too small for Jochen to be comfortable in. We had tested the race car, and it was very uncomfortable for him. And then Mosport, which is the most absolute dangerous racetrack in North America by far, Jochen made a decision. He made a decision, and I was shocked. Everybody was shocked about the decision. But then, if he was going to step out of the car, he had to find somebody to co-drive with me. And this wasn't like anyone beating up on Jochen saying, "Hey, please, don't get out of the car" or anything like this. This was absolutely his decision. He looked at the whole situation, the whole championship potential, the fact that he had a Porsche that nobody else had. We were right up there in the championship, and he said, this is my decision, and it was shocking. But then we had to find Dorsey. We had to find a co-driver. And Dorsey, Jochen and Dorsey were talking, and Jochen asked me, he said, "What do you think?" Dorsey showed us, said, "The guy's been racing cars like this for years. I'll guarantee you, he's going to probably be just driving the car right out of the box perfect, but you got to go check it out, see what, and then go ahead."
Yeah. Well, first of all, it wasn't that unselfish. I don't look at it like you do. I was thinking more for the team. I was thinking, more for the championship. I mean, this is what I looked at, and we discussed it. Whom we can put in the car, and there were really not that many people around. And then Andy said, "Hey, let's talk to Dorsey." And I've never met Dorsey before in my life, so there you are. So you're talking to a guy, and you ask him. I said, "Well, so what do you think?" I mean, you have that's true. That's exactly. He was there, in his motorhome. That's to this day he's still, driving around the country in his motorhome, and he was there, cooking chili. And so we knocked at his door and walked in and said, "Hey, Dorsey, we need to talk to you." And he said, "Yeah, come on in. Sit down, have some chili with me." And so we started talking, and but wow, I mean, that guy was amazing. Without like 2-3 minutes, I mean, there was a bond. I mean, you could tell, I mean, trust was there, and it was amazing. I mean, you guys did fantastic. Put the car right on the pole, and it was, I let you talk about that one.
Well, I mean, he's just one of those get-on-with-it kind of guys. I mean, I've been in sort of similar situations, but I knew that he'd be fine in the car immediately. But the thing was, it was basically like, let me finish my chili, I'll grab my helmet, I'll be right there, and now I'm running flat out, and he's on. I mean, that's Dorsey. And I still talk to Dorsey a lot, and he's gone into commentating a lot more, but he was, and still is, I'm sure, but at that time was a rocket ship driver and just a character beyond belief. He's awesome guy.
The thing that was funny was when Jochen came back to the pits and to the garage, and he goes, we just spoke with Dorsey Schrader, and I'm just like, Dorsey, Trans Am, running, because it wasn't really like, it wasn't, Christian Menzel or Andy or Stefan Ortelli, because Porsche controls these situations. And it was a very unusual situation for Dorsey to come over and drive the car. We're just like, No rubbing, please. Don't damage the car. But he was awesome.
Oh, yeah.
I was amazed how. So this is Daytona. We won Daytona with the GT2 in the 993 GT2 twin turbocharged car. And again, very similar to this, just a different chassis. In 97, and then we won Daytona in 98 with the gift from Porsche, which was to run their factory car. Just like 25 or 26, number 25 or 26, but and Jochen put his, crayon scribbles on the car, whatever it is. This was a neat media event that went on at Laguna Seca. So let's see here. Yannick Dalmas, Bob Wallach, Alan Nish, Joey, our calendars. Terry Bootson, actually one of the nicest guys. Have you worked with Terry?
Yeah, raced with Bootson. Yeah, raced with Bootson and Wallach at Sebring in the Evo car in '98.
Super
We finished
nice.
second. Yeah.
Didn't speak great English, but he was.
No, very nice guy. Not that F1 mentality.
Yes.
No prima donna at all. No.
When we, F1 just seems to breed, that prima donna mentality, but Alan didn't bring it along. Alan's actually pretty down to earth guy, McNish. And then there's the infamous Stuck. He's almost killed me a few times because it used to be where at Laguna Seca, actually, it used to be where, I could jump over the wall and wait for the car with my air gun to change the wheels. And I'm just sitting there waiting. I got my wheel next to me and my air gun, and I have to move because freaking Stookie is going to run over me. He's sliding into the pit box. He's just crazy. And Andy's respectful. So what I usually do is when I'm going to stop the car, I put my foot up. You'll see maybe in a photograph here or there. So just in case the car doesn't stop, and it's pushed me back some. It's not a big deal. But Stuck has no respect for the human life, I don't think. I don't know. There's Laguna Seca with, again, the factory car, the gift that we had. And I know we're getting later here, but there's one story we have to cover about this car. This car had not done well. Porsche had not performed well in this season. Mercedes was kicking our butts with those CLKs, even though they were fly cars, depending on the track you're at. And I'm not sure if I'm getting some feedback or whatever that is. I hate it. So basically, because it's just everywhere. It's me over there. But what happened was Porsche wasn't doing well. Mercedes was kicking our butts, and I'm going to have to do this, Jochen. I know you may not want to be doing this, but this is mine. Nobody has that, okay?
Okay. All right. Well, I talked a little bit about it yesterday. It's what happened is we ran car number 47 at Laguna Seca in the FIA World GT Championship. Porsche ran car number 25 and 26. We had Alan in the car, and we, as I said earlier, we were actually given, not the first choice of tires, but second choice of tires, but we made the best out of it, and we were actually out qualifying the factory. And so we,
okay.
Mr. Singer came over and he scratched his head, and I think that helped Brad a lot. I mean, that really helped, for Brad to advance, because I remember when he was like setting up the car, they all looked at him and they're like, oh my God, you don't
It was his setup.
It was his setup, exactly. And they were like, what are you guys doing? And
Brian and I just did what Brad told us.
Exactly. So anyway, so we were performing flawlessly. We put the car, actually we did put it, we qualified second, I think.
We were ahead of the Mercedes.
We were ahead of the
right
Mercedes.
there with them.
Yeah. And come turn first, or first turn, we were in first position.
Yes, we were.
And we led the race for...
Alan was driving, right?
Alan was driving,
Yeah.
and we led the race for quite a few laps. And Hans Stuck in the other car actually had a small accident or incident. He went off track, but he actually came back on and fell further back, and then one of the guys from Porsche Motorsport, came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and had my headset on, and he said, well, Jochen, you guys look really good. I mean,
Great
you're up
job.
there, first place, good job, but give me your car. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? So in mid-race, the cars got swapped, and which ultimately, I mean, worked out great for Porsche. You know, the end result was tremendous. I mean, it was the best result for the factory that year. And but it was definitely a little surprise. And then and then Alan got handed off to the works mechanics and the works team, and then Hans was handed over to us. But so those are the kind of things, 20 years later, I think you can talk about it, but it's okay. But that was the interesting part of that one.
I'll just go into a little bit of detail. So Brad comes over and he goes, when the car comes in, I need you to back up. You'll be doing you look like you're doing the pit stop, but you'll back up. So we're like, what? We've prepared this car. We set the car up. We got the car in a better position than it has been all season. And then now we're going to have to give up the status. So we backed up, the car came in, and we went right to the factory guys. So there you go, you got enough information on that one. So that was an interesting time. But that's team orders for you. That's how manufacturers play, And it's okay, they built a car. I mean, they did build a car. So I got a few photos of Laguna Seca here. Our car had the yellow on the windscreen and usually on the mirrors, but in this case, because that way you can tell which car is yours. Because it's very difficult to tell at a certain angle, as you can see the car number. But notice how nice and flat she is. This is turn 2 at Laguna Seca, and cars don't like to go around turn 2 at Laguna Seca. Yeah. Well, yeah. Here's somebody who can tell us.
Yeah. Laguna is one of the most slippery racetracks in North America, so what he's saying makes perfect sense. And the weirdest part about when you have a slippery track, you'd imagine the car needs to be compliant, but it's actually the opposite. And you end up with a stiffer car at Laguna than you'll get anywhere else, because that's the way you need, because you have enough turns that are fast enough to have a little bit of aero. So it's a complete contradiction in setup terms. And actually, I'll be there next Thursday to try and set up 2 cars for a team that I've never driven for, and 2 cars I've never driven before, because I got a call this week from Jim Bell. So I should remember that stuff when I get there, right?
Porsche? Yeah. Okay, say hi to Jim.
GT4 Cayman and a Cup car. Neither of which I've driven yet.
Jim, there's that.
Spar, that's why.
Oh, okay. Say hi to Jim. I've known him, as you know, like 50 years. Yeah. So Jim, I actually worked for in, I don't know whenever, 80s, on American Indy Series cars. And so we had the Craco Indy car. I don't know if you remember that one. So I worked on that and prepared the car. I never want to work on an Indy car ever again. You got to go head first down into the cockpit to get to the suspension bolts on those Lolas and some of those other cars. No, I'm not into that kind of stuff. I'm not going to try to tighten, loosen bolts on my head while doing a handstand. So basically, this is Champion Racing, or there's the tin top car, there's the GT1. This is the Lola, and I can say this now, but they had sent a letter to me, Champion Racing, saying because I didn't want to work anymore. Depending on who I work for, they said, come out and nut and bolt this $4 million boat anchor. Because at the time, this is a Lola B2K, and somebody had put together a GT1 engine and gearbox with this Lola chassis, which is very interesting. There's the 98 car, Generation 3, fully carbon car. I personally think Dallara had a lot to do with it. Porsche didn't have an autoclave, which is this big tube that heats up and has, you pulls it to a vacuum and you pull the car in, Porsche doesn't have this, so they hire somebody to build the car. It's a full carbon car, by the way, the tub. Monocoque. There's Alan. This is one of my favorite photos. Just the intense, because he was into it. He joked around, but he was into it. So, 98 car. I can't remember where this was, but I ran that car at one point. And but the 98s actually there was no privateer. They say there was one, but there was really no privateer with the 98s other than Zach Speed, which was like a factory team. But Randy, when we go to the archives, that'll be something we can look up because it's very interesting. Do you remember this? Petit Lama. We were watching the screens. I'm sitting in the pit box, just relaxing, waiting, for the driver to do his thing, and looking at the TV screen, and I literally saw this, and the car just Yannick Dalmas, I think.
Yeah, Dalmas, yes.
And he just took off.
Yeah.
Car just took off in the air. I mean, he was just pulling out behind, he got behind another car too closely, lost all downforce, and thousands of pounds of downforce, 8,000 or whatever it may be. You think the wing matters? Yeah, you can create some downforce in a wing, but the underbody makes a tremendous difference. Overhang makes a big difference from the center line of the wheel to the front of the car or to the back. And then you have the diffuser in the back, which is underneath. I love all of these Mitsubishis and these modern cars with these little tiny diffusers. I'm like, that does nothing. It does nothing. I mean, this is not a diffuser. And by the way, the diffuser is meant to, by law, or in our rules in racing, it can't go beyond the center line of the wheel. So if you ever look at most race cars, the diffuser starts there and shoots up with, slats and whatnot to direct the air coming out of the car. It's all about just directional airflow. Laminar airflow is critical. So there's another photo of that car taking off. I mean, imagine that. Imagine being the driver. Andy, what would that be like, man?
We lose the front of the car at Lime Rock. We raced at Lime Rock like 2 years ago, and we were getting 2 feet in the air coming over there at Lime Rock, but we didn't quite have enough velocity to bring it all the way up, thank goodness. But at Lime Rock, they have had cars do a complete wheel stand. They haven't flipped, but it's now we have a chicane at Lime Rock because, but the World Challenge cars, 2 years ago, they were fast enough that we were getting big air under the car. So it's pretty interesting. But I race motorcycles, and wheelies are okay by me. So I'm actually pretty comfortable at that angle, to be honest.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for making this trip. I know I'm cold. I'm sorry.
That's all good.